All right, today we're going to dive into the incredible story of Levodopa. It's without a doubt the single most powerful medication we have for Parkinson's disease. And honestly, it's a fascinating tale. It's all about medical genius, a biological fortress, and a really clever disguise. So let's pull back the curtain and see how this medical Trojan horse was built and how it manages to breach the brain's toughest defenses.
So right off the bat, this is the core problem, right? This is the central challenge when you're trying to treat Parkinson's. You've got the brain, this incredibly well-protected organ. Think of it like a fortress with these massive, high walls. And when it's missing something absolutely vital inside, just figuring out how to get that supply shipment past the gates, well, that's the biggest part of the battle.
Okay, so what's this vital message that's gone missing? It's a neurotransmitter called dopamine. You can basically think of it as a chemical text message that helps your brain control movement. Now, in Parkinson's, the brain cells that make this dopamine start to die off. The messages get disrupted, and that leads to those classic symptoms you hear about: tremors, stiffness, slowness of movement. The logical answer seems so simple, right? Just give the brain more dopamine. But as it turns out, the brain has an extremely strict security system.
And this is the fortress wall. It's called the blood-brain barrier, and it's a super selective gatekeeper. On one hand, it's fantastic. It keeps out toxins, viruses, all sorts of nasty stuff. But it's a huge obstacle for medicine. It sees dopamine floating in the bloodstream and basically says, nope, you're not on the list. It flat out denies it entry.
And this is what happens. You could flood a person's bloodstream with all the dopamine in the world, but it just can't get past that gatekeeper. It literally just bounces off the walls of the fortress, never ever reaching the part of the brain that so desperately needs it. So, scientists had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a totally new plan.
And the solution they came up with was just beautiful. It was so elegant. Instead of trying to force the messenger, dopamine, through the gate, they decided to send in a secret agent in disguise. And that agent? That's Levodopa. The best way to think about it is as the raw ingredient for dopamine. The body can take this ingredient and really easily convert it into the finished product.
So Levodopa's journey is a three-step mission. First, you take a pill, and it gets absorbed into your bloodstream. Second, and this is the genius part, its unique chemical structure is like a secret password. It lets it waltz right through the blood-brain barrier, no questions asked. And then third, only after it's safely inside the fortress, an enzyme goes to work and converts it into the dopamine the brain has been missing. The message is finally delivered. Mission accomplished.
But of course, there was another massive problem. It turns out that the very same enzyme that does the conversion inside the brain, well, it also exists all over the rest of the body. So what does that mean? It means as soon as Levodopa hits the bloodstream, the body starts turning it into dopamine right then and there, long before it ever gets a chance to even reach the brain.
And this is where our hero's story gets a sidekick, a second drug that honestly makes the whole mission possible. That drug is called Carbidopa. Think of it as the bodyguard for our Trojan horse, making sure it can actually complete its journey.
I mean, without this bodyguard, the numbers are pretty staggering. Check this out. About 90% of a Levodopa dose gets converted into dopamine out in the bloodstream. Not only is that a total waste, but it also causes some really unpleasant side effects, like serious nausea. Only a tiny fraction, just 10%, actually makes it to the brain.
Okay, so here's the truly brilliant part. Carbidopa's job is to block that conversion enzyme, but only outside the brain. And the reason it can do this is the key to everything. Carbidopa itself is too big to cross the blood-brain barrier. It's the perfect bodyguard. It fights off all the threats on the road to the fortress, but then it waits outside the gates, letting our Trojan horse, Levodopa, sneak in all alone to complete the mission. It's just so clever.
And the result? It's an absolute game changer. By adding Carbidopa to the mix, you increase the amount of Levodopa that actually gets to the brain by 5 to 10 times. This just makes the treatment so much more effective, and it massively cuts down on those awful side effects.
Now, for the first few years of treatment, this combination, it works incredibly well. Doctors and patients often call this the honeymoon period. Symptoms are under control, life gets dramatically better. But, and this is a big but, Parkinson's is a progressive disease. It doesn't stand still. And over time, new challenges start to creep in.
Yeah, so after about 5 to 10 years, the rhythm of the treatment can start to feel a little different. People might start to experience wearing off, which is exactly what it sounds like. Their Parkinson's symptoms start coming back before it's time for their next pill. Then, on the complete flip side, they might develop something called dyskinesia. These are uncontrollable, jerky, almost dance-like movements that happen right when the dopamine from the medication is at its peak.
This whole situation led to a huge, years-long debate in the medical world. People saw these complications pop up, and they started to wonder, wait a minute, is the cure actually part of the problem? Is Levodopa itself, our brilliant Trojan horse, somehow damaging the brain over the long haul?
This is the heart of what became known as the Levodopa paradox. And you can imagine, it caused a lot of fear. It's been researched like crazy. Is the very treatment that gives so much relief also somehow making the disease worse?
And the answer, based on everything we know today from the scientific consensus, is a clear, confident, and resounding no. The evidence is just not there. Levodopa itself is not toxic to brain cells. The Trojan horse is not the villain of the story.
So what's the real culprit then? Well, it's the relentless progression of Parkinson's itself. See, as the disease moves forward, the brain loses more and more of its own dopamine-producing cells. This means it also loses its ability to store and release dopamine in a nice, smooth way. The brain becomes totally dependent on the dopamine roller coaster that comes from each pill, this up and down or pulsatile stimulation. And that is what's believed to cause these long-term motor problems.
And all of this brings us to a really crucial point. Levodopa is an incredibly powerful tool for managing symptoms. It's amazing, but it is not a cure. And using this tool effectively becomes this delicate, constantly evolving art over the course of a person's life with Parkinson.
You can see this need for balance in the real-world management of the drug. For instance, something as simple as diet becomes critical. Why? Because levodopa uses the same pathway as protein to get absorbed from your gut. So a big steak dinner can literally block it from working as well. That's why timing the doses around meals is so important. And it's also why doctors use all these different formulations, from immediate-release pills to intestinal gels, all in an effort to smooth out that dopamine roller coaster as much as they possibly can. But even with all these long-term challenges, we can't lose sight of this one central fact. For more than 50 years, levodopa has been the gold standard. It is a life-changing medication that has given millions of people years of mobility and quality of life that they simply would not have had otherwise.
Ultimately, this journey with Levodopa reveals a really profound truth. This isn't just about taking a pill, it's a lifelong balancing act. And that leaves us with a pretty big final question, doesn't it? How do we, patients, families, doctors, navigate that incredibly fine line between a powerful treatment that gives back years of life and the relentless progression of a disease it can only manage but never cure?